I think stands, and I think that's the part that I hope lives on. Now, the question of who killed him is a very interesting one, and we're not going to solve it here tonight. But, you know, an NGO was created in 2012. The people who backed it, like a bunch of people dumped money into this thing, and it became a international, multinational NGO, 135,000 volunteers worldwide, I think now, multi-billion dollar like operations. That doesn't just happen. I mean, I think we all in this network and other places talk about this stuff to know that doesn't just organically happen in a few short years, the way that it did there. And, you know, there's like a cost benefit, pros and cons, like who benefits the most? I mean, that's the question I've been putting out. Who benefits the most from this situation? And the idea that like the left benefits the most from this, and like a crazed leftist benefits the most from this, I don't see it.
No, this is like actually a kill shot to no pun intended, obviously, but I actually think, to your point, the far left ideology is the most damaged by this.
Yes.
This event.
Yes.
In the public mind, and this is all about share of the public mind, right? Because you can sow chaos, but the point of sowing chaos for any side in a mind war is ultimately to, you know, get either real or the illusion of public mandate or consent on the back of it for new reality creation and paradigm formation. And you're not getting that in the far. You are not getting that in the far left for a generation or five after this, because again, I'm in Canada, and like the Canadians are saying the far left has gone crazy.
Yes.
And they need to be handled, while then letting me know that they hate Trump, right? But like that is an untouchable and toxic ideology, and they cannot publicly brand anything with it for 20 plus years.
Yes, and real quick, just to address that, if the goal, and this is a little bit of conjecture and speculation, like I understand this is subjective, but like if the goal of the person, like let's just like adopt the narrative as fact for a minute, and this was a crazed leftist ideologue, maybe even a conspiracy of multiple ideologues working together to pull this thing off. If the goal was to sow chaos and to inspire fear and to make people afraid to show up to an event like Charlie Kirk's campus events, why would they just fire one shot and run away? Why would they not unload on everybody and maximize the casualties, maximize the terror, and be like, wow, all these random people, like random kids who just showed up after history class, they walked outside and went to the quad and listened to Charlie Kirk and they ended up dead. Like that could have been me. Like I'm never going to one of those things now. It's like,
more of a mass terror campaign.
Yeah. But now to steal your term and steel man the argument against it, the guy wanted to get away. But it's like, dude, I mean, did he really think he was going to get away? He then turned around and turns himself in. Like, none of that makes any sense. And so I don't buy the idea that this was just a crazed ideologue who wanted to take out Charlie Kirk. If he wanted to create terror and make sure people never show up to an event like that, I think you would be unloading like on everybody after you take out Kirk.
Yeah. And I would say too, you said, discovering who is behind it could be, and this could really be an inflection point. I used the term Shatterpoint earlier. You mentioned a few names there, famous assassinations. The year 1968 is coming up a lot this week. Robert Kennedy Sr., Martin Luther King Jr., obviously. The Kirk assassination, I think, most immediately recalls MLK, in my opinion.
Me too.
I'm not comparing him to MLK. Like, we've been very open. Like, I didn't particularly like Charlie Kirk in terms of his political stances. We've been open about that. I think it's actually more respectful to be open and honest about that rather than pretending you were some like evangelical Charlie Kirk shill for the last few years. Didn't agree with Charlie politically, but totally agree with you that the man was preaching literally in what felt like a very earnest way for years about faith and everything. Every anecdote I've seen of him, not just coming out of Con Inc., was that was very genuine, that was who he was. behind the scenes. There's anecdotes filtering through the battle space right now from people disconnected from politics, that are culture figures, talking about having met Charlie Kirk, and I literally have never heard a bad word about him. I've never, as a man and how he presents himself. That's not the case with most of these media figures. That is not the case with a lot of the guys that people in this community like or don't like. Behind the scenes opinion of them shifts dramatically. Charlie Kirk is remarkably consistent in terms of how people felt about him, having met him. So I think that stuff is real. So when I say the MLK analog, I think it's because you mentioned who is a massive question. I agree with you. I think the second question is bigger, which is why.
Yep.
And that is, and I know you would know that as well, but I think the who is big. The why is what I think could change culture. The reason I bring up MLK is because if you kill JFK, if you kill RFK, obviously deep state, obviously everybody, even normies, knows that there's ulterior dark motives to those assassinations, right? But there's something strange. There's a cognitive disconnect I've been thinking about this week when you assassinate a politician. There's some almost understanding in the psyche that when you enter the political battle space, you have entered a very literal battle space where you have governments, three-letter agencies, clandestine outfits, foreign actors, all vying for your influence and attention and power, or to remove that influence, attention, and power, right? So I'm just saying that I think that as jarring as an attempt on Donald Trump feels and felt, there's some level of, this makes sense, right? There's some level of that everybody kind of gets. MLK was not a politician, right? MLK was simply a thinker and a speaker and a believer, somebody who spoke to people and had no designs on the presidency and all of that. Now, there's theories of could Charlie Kirk have run for office in the future? Sure. But he wasn't. Yeah. He wasn't a politician. He was a culture figure. When you kill a culture figure, I would suggest that represents that you, as the apparatus behind that, have attained a level of fear of what's happening in American culture. It's a moment of blinking, I think. You try to take out politicians, you're getting desperate, but you are engaging in warfare. You start killing culture leaders like MLK, you've declared war pretty directly on the American public that you've been trying to psyop. And I think that's why I feel that this one is different. It's not that Charlie Kirk is bigger than Donald Trump. It's that his assassination was targeting a communicator, an orator, a speaker, and again, a believer in Christ and a Christian. So, I think that might be part of why it hits a little differently. So if people find out, quote unquote, why this has happened, I think that might be the biggest revelation, which is, yeah, you are dealing with a cabal, a subversive Marxist cabal that wants to destroy your way of life, not just get the orange man out of office.
Yeah, and like just to give an example, and I'm not jumping the gun here and saying like this is exactly what I think happened, but like let's just look at 9/11, right? I mean, when you stop and you back up and you look at everything that came out of 9/11, the Patriot Act and George Bush and the War on Terror and all those things, and then you realize that the Republican Party is actually the one who did 9/11. I mean, look at Brad Zerbo's film, right? I mean, the Republican Party, I mean, look, I get the uniparty, but I'm saying the Republican Party, a Republican administration was in power when that happened. So they're the ones who facilitated.
They carried it out. Yeah.
They carried it out, right? I mean, that revelation should fundamentally change everybody's perspective on the Republican Party moving forward, especially when it comes to foreign wars and the way the Republican Party, like the Republican shills, talk about Putin and all these other guys out there. I would say the same thing about Charlie Kirk. Like, again, hypothetically, because I'm not going to jump the gun here, But if we were to find out that the Republican Party was somehow involved in the assassination of Charlie Kirk, doesn't that fundamentally change the way you look at the Republican Party forever? I mean, doesn't that change the way that you look at Fox News and you look at all those things? So, like, almost more so. I mean, I don't want to go that far, but like Charlie Kirk is fresh. Like, that's fresh. 9/11 feels like ancient history at this point. Charlie Kirk is fresh, and I just feel like that maybe those two things together. I mean, that could be potentially the end of the Republican Party if it is demonstrated that somehow there was Republican establishment figures involved in that conspiracy. And I do think it was a conspiracy. The question is, like, to what level does it go to? Does it go to the government? Does it go to foreign intelligence? Does it go to, State Department, CIA, whatever? But General Flynn posted that he thinks it is a foreign nation trying to destabilize the United States. So that carries a lot of weight.
And, one of the ways I've put this in my writing is we're fighting the nation of no nations, right? That is what the deep state is. I think it's good that Chris talks about good twin, evil twin, because we kind of got to get out of, even though we use this terminology a lot for the sake of context, when we're talking about nation states, we're sort of assigning macro identities to nation states that really do not exist. When we're dealing with the deep state, when we're dealing with quote unquote foreign actors, like you're saying, and like Flynn is saying, we need to tell the story to the American people that we're not talking about foreign actors in terms of acting on behalf of foreign nations. We're talking about foreign nations acting on behalf of a nationless nation known as the deep state or the cabal, right? That's ultimately what this is. It's not that France is doing something and England is doing something, even though we're going to talk about that in a little bit. It's that they're wearing those nations as skin suits because they belong to a nation without borders, and they belong to a globalist nation. So in terms of sort of last little topic on the Kirk thing here, in terms of who did it, in terms of the who, obviously we don't have all the answers yet, but I think it's pretty interesting and encouraging to see the way Stephen Miller and Trump and some of these guys, Nunez, are handling the communications. And they're clearly drawing a line between these NGOs you're talking about and things like the thing that happened to Charlie Kirk, even though I think that they're pretty much telling you directly. I saw a report tonight, came out of Axios. I haven't been able to go through the whole thing, but talking about the No Kings movement. That's one of the leads right now. And I think the No Kings movement was funded by Arabella investors, which reminds me, I had written something August 27th on my Substack that I just wanted to show here in this context. And I think this will make you just kind of perk up a little bit. So this is a little section in my brief, Mapping Began Long Ago. You got our boy Bill there. So look at this post from Trump from August 27th. George Soros and his wonderful radical left son should be charged with RICO because of their support of violent protests and much more all throughout the U.S. We're not going to allow these lunatics to rip apart America anymore, never giving it so much as a chance to breathe and be free. Soros and his group of psychopaths have caused great damage to our country. That includes his crazy West Coast friends. Be careful, we're watching you. Thank you for your attention to this matter. The breathe reference there, I would say, is a reference to George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. But so I had noted this at the time. And one of the things I'd said here was on the same day that Trump took this warning shot on George Soros, Bill Gates divested from Arabella. He divested his funding from Arabella. So, interesting. I wrote about it here. The Gates Foundation's abrupt severance from Arabella Advisors, a dark money hydra funneling billions into radical leftist psyops, blah, blah, blah. Gates' retreat is framed as a strategic pivot. It comes amid escalating probes into shadow networks with over $450 million funneled since 2008, now exposed as fuel for the deep state's narrative engines, shielding Soros affiliates and their ilk while bleeding the Republic dry. And then I had said, right here, This isn't an isolated fracture. It's the latest cascade in a layered pre-planned exposure sequence synchronized with the dismantling of the globalist superstate, the warmongers NATO bloc, which we'll get to tonight, and the festering corruption at the heart of the U.S. state apparatus. Why now? Because Trump is priming the psychological battle space for a justice campaign of unprecedented scope, surfacing RICO charges against the likes of former untouchables at all levels, at once not as mere legal maneuvers, but as cognitive ciphers that bind the corporate oligarchs to the same necrotic flow. As you say, is 2025 evisceration. This isn't just about spectral puppeteers, but the battlefield itself. The interlocking rivers of dark money, NGO infiltration, and state-level complicity that stem from the same collectivist source. So, this is 3 weeks ago. We've got Bill Gates divesting from Arabella. We've got George Soros involved in Arabella, obviously. And we've got the No Kings movement funded by Arabella. And we've got Donald Trump warning Arabella on August 27th, we're watching you. And on a macro level, if I'm looking at who, on the who question, I'm not blaming a specific NGO, but I am saying this might look like it's a response to Trump's war on the NGOs. That's part of it. It's either that they knew something was coming from this apparatus in the near future, and they're telling them, like, you better not do it, or Trump and team saying we are coming after you provoked a destabilization activation. That's kind of where I'm going in my mind. And I remembered that today. I hadn't thought about this all week because it's been so jarring and dissociative almost. But I had the thought. I was like, wait a second. Didn't Bill Gates just divest from Arabella? Wasn't Trump just warning these guys? And now they're, Trump and his administration are basically piggybacking off of the Charlie Kirk assassination and doubling down on the NGO targeting. So I don't know. That, to me, that seems like what the target is in the public mind right now.
Yeah, it's a great point. And, first of all, I need proof of life that George Soros is alive, because I have not seen him in many years. And they wheeled out his whelp years ago, and they gave him Hillary Clinton's handler as a wife. And they're trying to build up his character, so he's somebody of importance, probably for the moment that they're going to announce that George Soros is dead, so that he is not just coming out of nowhere. But yeah, that's all very, very well said. I think Soros is a very useful character at this point, a vehicle, kind of like Epstein. Like Epstein's the vehicle to explain, like honeypot and like what's that term? The term like the sex.
Yeah, honeypot.
Yeah. The blackmail stuff, compromat or whatever. He's a useful vehicle to explain that. I think Soros is a useful vehicle to explain how NGOs subvert and destroy countries from the outside in. And that kind of takes us right into like the Putin,
sure,
Putin in the Europe discusussion.
Yeah. I want to hit one more thing, or kind of have actually Stephen Miller take us out of this section.
Yeah.
Great call though with Soros. Totally agree. The term I use in my writing is cognitive ciphers, a template, walking template. I think Elon is one. I think Donald Trump is one. But I think we use those characters as ciphers as well. And I totally agree with you. It's not about George Soros. It's about what George Soros represents.
Yep.
And Bill Gates is trying to get out of the game, it looks like, narratively. So, hey, we starting to see some friendly fire in the NGO billionaire space. Are they starting to pull rank a little bit?
Make a note of that, everyone. The Bill Gates thing, just make a note of Bill Gates and just put that in the back here, because that's going to come back when we go to Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right, one more thing on this topic, and then I want to get into Russia, because it's a perfect transition from here. I'm just going to let Stephen Miller, based on what we're talking about, with NGOs and the campaign, keep in mind, this is Miller responding to the Charlie Kirk situation. And it's kind of interesting, right? He's not doing the, lone wolf, radical leftism. He's picking targets here, I would suggest. I would suggest that he is targeting the American mind and that Donald Trump is trying to refocus the American mind on these shadow networks.
There is a domestic terrorism movement in this country. When you see these organized doxing campaigns where the left calls people enemies of the republic, calls them fascists, says they're Nazis, says they're evil, says they have to be removed, and then prints their addresses, what do you think they're trying to do? They are trying to inspire someone to murder them. That is their objective. That is their intent. And when you see online, Sean, as we've seen for the last few days, tape after tape after tape of federal workers, bureaucrats, staffers in the Pentagon, educators, professors, healthcare workers, nurses, celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk. These are radicalized people. There is a domestic terrorism movement in this country. And let me tell you something I've not shared with anybody, but the last message that Charlie Kirk gave to me before he joined his creator in heaven was he said that we have to dismantle and take on the radical left organizations in this country that are fomenting violence. That was the last message that he sent me before that assassin stole him from all of us. And we are going to do that under President Trump's leadership. I don't care how. It could be a RICO charge, a conspiracy charge, conspiracy against the United States, insurrection, but we are going to do what it takes to dismantle the organizations and the entities that are fomenting riots, that are doxing, that are trying to inspire terrorism, and that are committing acts of wanton violence. It has to stop. And my message is to all of the domestic terrorists in this country spreading this evil hate, you want us to live in fear? We will not live in fear, but you will live in exile, because the power of law enforcement under President Trump's leadership will be used to find you, will be used to take away your money, take away your power, and if you've broken the law, to take away your freedom, Sean.
All said, Stephen Miller.
So I'm sure a lot of people saw that. There's been a million things running around, in the battle space this week, but I really keyed in on that one because let's just take him at face value. He's telling the truth. I thought it was interesting that he makes sure speaking of drafting, in my opinion, we saw Stephen Miller employ some drafting that you're talking about with Trump on Fox and Friends. In fact, actually, to your point, Trump, it seemed like, was responding to an op. Miller, I think, was drafting there. The reason I say that is he leads with all of the MSM talking points about the Charlie, and I mean right-wing MSM talking points, the Fox talking points. He leads by talking about domestic terrorism, the left. And then he transitions from Charlie Kirk and says Charlie Kirk wanted to dismantle these non-governmental shadow networks. And I think that Miller is telling you, this is who killed Charlie Kirk. Mm-hmm. We told you in August we're going after them. And we're telling you now we are definitely going after them. And I think it's a subtle battle that we're alluding to that seems to be going on between the Trump administration narratively and the Fox News contingent. Fox wants to talk about the left and radical leftism. Miller wants to talk about non-governmental organizations who happen to be funding the left. So I think there's a difference there. And I think the distinction is going to be important in the months ahead.
Yeah, that's well said. That's that those networks. I mean, I've been talking about this. You've been talking about this. We've all been talking about this. But when it comes to actuals, I've been. You used to edit when you edited the Badlands News Brief. You know that I have the map here. I can show people the map. But Fico from Slovakia, we talked about him last week because he was at the SCO meeting in Tianjin. He was shot 5 times in the chest in May of 24 because he passed what's called the Kremlin law or the Putin law to force foreign NGOs that are operating in Slovakia to disclose their funding sources. And that was worth shooting him over because once you disclose that, you're revealing, it's probably like a CIA cutout. And then, of course, Georgia right after that, the prime minister from Georgia is trying to pass the exact same law. This is last summer, summer of 24. He gets threatened with the same thing. Somebody picks up the phone from the EU and says, you saw what happened to Fico. You might be next if you don't back off and stop trying to pass this law. So this network is very, very real. And it's used, to the extent that they will murder politicians, they will murder prime ministers, shoot them 5 times in the chest for passing a law that Putin passed back in 2003, and then passed subsequent ones that really solidified and fortified Russia against foreign NGOs, specifically George Soros's Open Societies Foundation.
Perfect transition into our second main topic, which is Russia shenanigans. So, and NGOs. So, we'll get into the second part of this in a minute, which is the Russian drone controversy. Got washed out in the war stories this week, even though it's probably a big narrative. But I wanted to your point about these NGOs, it is interesting that once again these sovereign alliance bros that we've been talking about for years and that the media still tells you are very, very bad, including Fox and Friends, tell you they're very, very bad. To Ghost's earlier point, they've been fighting these shadow networks that Trump is targeting for a long, long time. And I don't know if you saw, I think you saw this. I don't know if I sent this to you or you sent this to me. I think I sent this to you a couple days ago. Our boy, the firebrand, Dmitry Medvedev, had a few words on the Charlie Kirk killing. And I thought that they were pointed and signal. So Medvedev blames political violence in the U.S. on support for Ukraine after Charlie Kirk killing. Now, this is misleading. This is a very misleading headline. Oops. Here's what he said. He said, following the killing, Medvedev, who now serves as the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, blamed the spate of politically motivated attacks in the U.S. in recent years, including 2 assassination attempts on Trump, on quote, a variety of left-wing liberal scum who support Banderite Kyiv. Who's next? Maybe it's time for the MAGA team to realize that by supporting Ukraine, they're supporting murderers. I thought that was a little more signal than just surface level, because he's talking about the Banderites and the Ukrainians. And for those who don't know or haven't gone down there, essentially the long and short of it is from the 40s, the Banderites were like pro-Nazi or Nazi sympathizing Ukrainians who were facilitating a lot of their activities in the borderlands. And so the Banderites are not publicly called Nazis, but I think that that's pretty generous to not call them Nazis. They're basically Nazis. They are Nazis. And Medvedev is comparing the killers of Charlie Kirk to the Banderites. And then one more piece of this, to pass it to you, is that the basically legacy of the Banderites were responsible for planning and carrying out the Maidan coup.
Yes. So
talk about the same enemy, and that's kind of the macro theme that developed in my notes that I was going over for the last couple of days, is, man, from the Charlie Kirk killing to Russia and Ukraine onto what we're going to talk about with Venezuela, turns out it's all the same thread. And I just thought I thought Medvedev's statement there was interesting, and why the fact that he chose to say, this reminds me of the Banderites. He's not talking about lone wolves. He's talking about exactly what Stephen Miller's talking about there. He's saying these are networks. Networks are involved in domestic terrorism in the United States, and the Trump administration needs to take it seriously. So I don't know what you thought about that.
Yeah, and just to be clear, so Stepan Bandera was a militia leader who was operating in Ukraine before the Nazis came along, before the Third Reich came along, and basically became like a mercenary for them. Like, they recruited him and said, all right, like we'll work with you. We know we have aligning views because you're fighting the Soviets, you're anti-Soviet, so we're gonna work with you. And then basically he was such an extremist where he would just ruthlessly like destroy villages, kill innocents, all that the Third Reich had to kind of almost distance themselves from him because he was so brazen about it, that there became a back and forth. So and that could all just be narrative. Who knows? But that's the official narrative, is that there was a split between them. I think they may have I think the Third Reich may have thrown him and Stepan Bandera in jail shortly, if I remember correctly. But the point is that he had narrative shielding from being like an official Nazi at the end of World War II. And what that allowed is for the CIA to come in after World War II and hire him to be one of their operatives, and he became one of the chief regime change operators in Eastern Europe, in like the 1950s, 1960s. Like the thing that we now call Operation Gladio, he was doing that in Eastern Europe for the CIA. And then to that point, he is now considered a hero in Ukraine. There's statues of him all over Ukraine. And that flag you've seen, it's like a black triangle and a red triangle to make up like the rectangle of a flag. That's called the Banderite flag. That's all over Ukraine now. And the really, really strange part is that like Igor Kolomoisky came up with some term. I forgot exactly what it was, but it's a Ukrainian word that means Hebrew Banderite. And then there's